look at Egyptian art one more time. Is there some drawing behind you, Olusegun? Is there that drawing of the wall?
Yeah. Those are the things my daughter bought in a superstore and they paste on the wall.
Nice. Nice. It's a nice decal. Yeah, time for you to start drawing those things and actually put your drawings. I want to see your hands up, and I want to see all your art up, not just things that you buy from the store, because you are all capable now of making your own art to decorate your walls.
Okay, that's good.
All right, so we are going to jump into Egypt. The quiz is going to be in my courses by the end of the week. You will have until next, again, it's 3 simple questions, but you will have till next Monday to finish them off, okay?
Hi.
That's how it goes, right? All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to jump into Egypt. And we're doing the second part of Egyptian art, which is from the New Kingdom forward. And we are going to cover a good period of Egypt. Again, Egyptian art was meant for a very different purpose, right? We were talking about how art has and serves very different purposes for different cultures. In our culture, it tends to be...
Professor,
yeah, go ahead.
Do you have this thing in this slide?
Do I have what?
What you are teaching us right now is in this slide?
It's in the slides, and also there's a textbook. There's a book that you can download. This is
yes. I read the textbook, but I want the details like this. Can we go? How do we get it in the slide?
So the slides should also be in my courses. Let me just let me show you where those are in my RCC, because both of those slides should be in when we go to our course. Let me just log in very quickly, and they should, both of them, the slideshows should be in unit 7. But let me check to make sure that it is there.
Can we see it on the screen?
Yeah, it's right here. So when you go to unit 7, week 8.
No, we didn't see where you are going on the RCC.
It's okay. So this is just when you go into my RCC, into the course, into the art, you will get to the overview. And the overview will bring you to this page, Unit 7, Week 8.
Sorry, Professor. Can we see it on the screen? We are only seeing the slide.
Oh, you're not seeing it. Okay, hold on one second. Let me, yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking that I could just switch over, but sometimes can you see it now?
Okay, good. Okay. Yes, we can see it now.
You're in my RCC, you're in Overview, you see Unit 7, Week 7. And if you scroll down, you see, first of all, link to the textbook. That will give you, and the pages that you're looking at, that we're looking at today, are pages 55 to 62. And those are the ones actually that are going to be covered on the quiz. So you can focus, for the quiz, you can focus on just that chapter 6, okay? We started the PowerPoint for the first section of Egypt on Monday.
Okay, that's the PowerPoint, right?
Right, and that's the PowerPoint, and this is the second PowerPoint that we're looking at today.
Okay, I see.
So both of them should be there, but that's a great question, especially for those people that are not on the phone call. So we're gonna jump over to the PowerPoint. All right, and we're talking again, the New Kingdom happens when actually there's a new pharaoh that comes on. There's always a period of instability for Egypt, but then there's a really stable section. And we talked about in the art terms, they have a very stylized, very specific form of art that actually lets them communicate between the Egyptian culture started about 3000 BCE, and the folks that would have been looking at the artwork 3000 years later would still very much understand the hieroglyphics. They would understand the visuals of the Egyptian culture because it was standard. The artwork was passed on from generation to generation. And so each generation would learn the type of art that, that ancient Egypt was making. So it was this really continuous style that didn't sway for a very, very long time, which is very, very impressive, because if we think about it, each generation, especially in our era, wants to improve or do something different or do something new from the way that the parents do it and the grandparents do it. So it's interesting to see the consistency of Egyptian art throughout the thousands of years. We also talked about on Monday, right, like when we're talking about years, and if we're thinking about we're in 2020, it's a really interesting date. Of course, human beings have existed on the planet for 60,000 years, right? And it's interesting how we disregard history in a strange way, because we think we started at zero. It doesn't make sense. We didn't start 2,000 years ago. We started 60,000 years ago, right? And the Egyptian culture would have been 5,000 years ago, in which they flourished. So it's interesting to keep that history in mind and kind of in our heads when we think about math, we think of zero as the beginning, right? But of course, that's not, that was, because of Christ and because after Common Era, we started counting in a new way, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a civilization before then, right? We have to be careful of these numbers when we look at when things happen, right? So this is the New Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom disintegrated with the invasion of Hyksos of Mesopotamia and Syria. So initially civilization, or the civilization in our history, started in Mesopotamia, which is current day Middle East, right over here. Then we go into Egypt, which also was flourishing because of the Nile River. You have a really fertile land around the Nile that in a desert setting, this is really where people can thrive, is around this region. In Mesopotamia was a similar kind of thing where you had two rivers over here that made a fertile crescent of land for people to stop hunting and gathering and following the herds in order to survive, and to start sustaining themselves on agriculture, and therefore having more time to devote to things like politics and art and religion, because otherwise you would be hunting and gathering for food in order to survive every day, right? So, and that's another reason why the artists and the scribes of Egypt could focus on their work and have this really the time really to devote to their practice and evolve the artistic practice, because they weren't in this idea of a starving artist doesn't make sense, right? If you're starving, you go and hunt and you go get food, or you go get a job and go get food. So you need extra time, leisure time, in order to create and produce things. And so that's another reason why civilization had this now extra time and power to spare onto creative fields. All right, so the New Kingdom begins with the Egyptians driving out the Hyksos using new battle technologies, including war chariots and compound bows. Egypt would grow to its greatest extent from the Middle Era on, and you're talking about 1500 BCE, okay? So the civilizations already flourished for the last 1,500 years, but they really drive out most of the invaders over here from Mesopotamia, and they become a whole new empire. And the empire started of the New Kingdom with Hatshepsut. And Hatshepsut created a temple, which is different from most temples that we see. This is the temple for the pharaoh Hatshepsut from about 1437 to 1458 BCE. And when we think about mortuary temples, or when we think about temples, we generally think of the pyramids. We think about structures that go out of the ground. Here, Hatshepsut is digging back into the earth and quite literally taking the stone from what she digs to create this kind of architecture. It's very, very interesting. When you go up close to it, when you go up to visit the temple, you are in awe of the natural landscape that this is dug out of, right? You have these mountains behind you, really surrounding the temple. And the temple and the architecture, the orderness of that, the order of these columns, for example, is in direct contrast to the naturalized landscape of the back, right? You have that curve of the background, you have the natural rocks, and then you have a very systematic order that that this temple is built on. Also, for the temple, once a year there would be a procession to the gods, and there's a sculpture that would be carried from the other side of the Nile through this passageway up the temple. And that's important to know because Hatshepsut on the side, she had cast a lot of sculptures, not only of the standard sort of Egyptian sculptures right here that are on the columns, but she also created hundreds of sculptures of herself. Now there's no, she was a female, but there's no word for queen in Egyptian. There was a different level of power that women had in Egypt, but she was the first to really claim that she, in fact, was the king. And she did that in a number of ways, in sort of propaganda ways. She created sculptures, she created stories. She was the next one in line, but she was a female. However, she made a story that there was a prophecy that a female pharaoh was coming, and really spread this throughout the land, like her story throughout there. And so it shows she understood the power of art once she created this form. So this is Hatshepsut. She's wearing the king's crown. She's also wearing the king's beard. In fact, I think it's stylized where she still has the broad shoulders, her breasts are lower, but she's doing this interesting gesture because these sculptures, there were about 8 or 10 of them, would line the temple as you walk up. So as you walked up the stairs of the temple right here, she would be standing and offering not to man, but to the gods. So these bowls are meant to directly to be in relationship with that procession that was taking the gods over into her temple. So it would be an offering to the gods that she was in this pose, because we don't see this pose with other pharaohs. It's a very, this is hard on your knees. This is not something that you would do often, this kind of gesture. So she's putting herself as offering to the gods, but she's also transforming. A pharaoh would eventually, when they die, become a god, right? So she's very much putting herself in a huge position of power. And in fact, she reigned for 20 years and brought some of the greatest financial and glory to Egypt that the kingdom had seen. At the end of her reign, after 20 years, they did try to the next pharaoh tried to wipe her away with really taking away all the sculptures and all of the paintings that were of Hatshepsut. But they're certainly, because there were hundreds of them, they remain. This is a tomb painting. Scribes, the people who wrote the hieroglyphs and hieroglyphs and painting were so intertwined because they were pictorial, they were images. But scribes in Egyptian culture were held in high esteem. We looked at that sculpture of the scribe from Monday, where it's next to the pharaohs, they really sustained an economic wealth. And you can see this in the decoration of this tomb. It was 4-walled, and it was meant to take Nebamun into the afterlife with the tools that he enjoyed during his life. So on some of the scenes, you can see this is him in standard Egyptian style. So you can think about the palette of Narmer, where the position of the body is front with the shoulders and side with the feet. He's also here enjoying a hunt, which wouldn't be necessarily for survival, but it would be for pleasure and for like pastime, like you go hunting as a fun activity. And this is his wife over here next to him, as well as his daughter over here holding onto the leg over here. But the way that this is painted is quite extraordinary. It's almost like the Sistine Chapel of the Egyptian culture. When you step into the tomb, you have 4 walls that surround you with beautiful paintings. Look at how, for example, the cat over here is painted in detail with the fur, with the texture. Right now it's biting the duck's wing, but the detail that the Egyptian culture knew, that the painters, the scribers, the people who created this wall, is really outstanding. Have a look at the details of the butterfly, for example, over here, the antenna, the legs, how they knew natural form. Look at the birds over here with their feet. And this is painted relatively quickly. This is painted directly into the plaster of the wall. So when you plaster the wall of the tomb, you put a layer of gypsum or plaster on top of the wall, but you have to go painting very quickly back into the gypsum before it dries out, before the plaster dries out with pigment. So it's difficult to do. It's an amazing skill. And again, with the details that you see in the texture of the way they painted feathers, the way that they painted natural landscape, it's really extraordinary technique, and really someone who really had to study natural forms for a very long time to paint it so quickly, so fresh. There's no mistakes in this, right? Like this is a drawing that's quickly transcribed onto the wall and then put color placed into it. So again, the technique of this is just extraordinary and so beautiful. Any questions about the Nebamum or anything that you can see from where you're looking in terms of detail? Of course, it was also, you know, once it was found, this tomb, it was also broken apart and taken. You can see how the archaeologists of the time really ripped it to shreds and got it into the museum. It's really a terrible. There's always a question with Egyptian art, right? This art was not meant for people. This is not an artist who would go and say, "Hey, I painted this great painting in a tomb. Come check it out." This is something that is meant to be sealed off and really go into the afterworld. And again, it's a painting for the gods, which is a very different kind of painting, I think, if we think about it. It's it's really extraordinary to think of doing it for a different purpose rather than sort of self-glory or you know, to show it off. It's more, this is meant to be for an eternity. And of course, once we go, as archaeologists go and take out objects from the tomb, what are they really doing? I mean, it's almost like grave robbing, right? So there's this double-edged sword where, yes, it's an amazing image for us to study and have images of, but at the same time, you know, we really broke it apart. It's really in terrible state, and it's a shame that that the archaeologists would go to this extent. And of course, all the Egyptian artifacts are mostly found with their dead, right? So really, what are we doing to the dead? Here's a little detail of both the hieroglyphs, the Nebamum, right? And just look at the way that this is painted, like really precise, thin brush for the outline. You have a thick brush for the color of the skin. You have this really fine detail in the birds as well as in the human form. And this again would be a style that would still be resonate. People from 3000 BCE would know what this said, and people from 30 BCE would know what it said, right? So cross generations, Egyptian culture ruled for a very, very long time. Look at the birds. I mean, look first of all, look at how many different varieties and species, right? But then you're looking at the color, the shape, and the form, and how the artist knew to paint those simple, beautiful brushstrokes. Just incredible, just amazing. By the way, this is the lotus flower that he has over his shoulder that represents eternity, right? So he was meant to enjoy the state for eternity, this hunt. There's also a scene with him sitting, having a feast with friends. Again, something that was meant to be for eternity. At that point, you have Akhenaten comes to power. He's another pharaoh that comes to power, but moves the center of Egyptian government up to Akhenaten right here, up from Thebes. And that's a very drastic change because the seat of the power has always been down here. He moves, Akhenaten moves the city, but he also moves power. He also moves artistic style. So Akhenaten is a pharaoh. His wife was Nefertiti. You can see them here in their altar, the house altar that's depicting him, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, but also he changed the idea of many gods for Egyptian culture to one god. He changed it to Aten, and Aten being sun in the center is depicted by the sphere. The sun's rays go over and kind of reach out in these kind of small hands, but at the end of a couple of them that go to Akhenaten and Nefertiti, they have an Ankh sign, which is an everlasting symbol that they will, you know, that, and they are the ones that are blessed. So it really gives only him. So first of all, he narrows it down to one God, belief in one God, the sun god. He also changes the Greek style. This is very different from how, I'm sorry, not the Greek, the Egyptian style, very different from what ancient Egypt and the way that the bodies were structured, right? Usually have, like in the tomb of Nebamum, you have those kind of standard forms. Here, it's incredibly different. Look at how he's stylized. First of all, this is like a picture of a home setting. You have Akhenaten here with his oldest daughter, holding her very tenderly by the head. He's actually giving her a kiss on the nose. And then Nefertiti is here with the other two children over here, one on her shoulder, one on her lap. So this is almost like a family snapshot, family picture. You also see Akhenaten with like a pudgy belly, which again was a symbol of royalty, that you had a little extra fat because you could enjoy life a little bit more. But it is very much stylized. They did not look like this. They did not, this is not a, some people have called it like a deformed style. But it was a certain, he just wanted to break from tradition, which is one of the first times and only times in Egyptian culture. It goes back to the other style after Akhenaten in 350 BCE. So really, this is a whole other way of depicting Egyptian. And of course, Nefertiti was one of the most beautiful women that was ever sculpted. There's a bust of her that is sculpted in a very realistic way. But here, the bodies are elongated. The heads of the children are elongated. Of course, ancient aliens have taken this and run with it, right? That they were not, in fact, human. What do you see? What do you see in this image? I mean, it's a complete shift from Egyptian art to this kind of style, right? And it also depicts that they are the only two that are really the true rulers of Egypt, because they're the ones that are really transcending the word of God into practice. But again, that only lasted during Akhenaten's reign. As soon as the next pharaoh came along, he moved the center of power back to Thebes. And so we're going to go back to Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun is buried in, is one of the most extraordinary tombs. It was the archaeologist who was digging it up actually was supposed to end that year, but he got an extension for an extra year and found Tutankhamun's tomb, which you can see the layout. First, they got through the stairs over here. There was a wall and a barrier. You have this hallway corridor over here. Then you have a second doorway that they had to break through, antechamber, burial chamber, and finally the treasury. The treasury would have been all the goods and artifacts that would have been buried with the pharaoh. And again, they were the most precious objects that Egypt had. And again, were meant obviously for the pharaoh to enjoy in the afterlife. Tutankhamun died early in his life, and the sarcophagus wasn't ready. He died maybe in a battle or in a chariot race, not far away from Thebes. So it was a kind of a rushed tomb, really, for Tutankhamun. This is the innermost sarcophagus, and of course that it really wowed the archaeologists at the time. It's made out of solid gold. Again, gold is meant to, the material, as well as the color lapis lazuli right here that's inlaid, are meant to transform the body into a godly state, right? So this is a way for Tutankhamun to become and transform into the god. Of course, we have taken the tomb out. We've taken the sarcophagus, and yeah, and we've taken all the treasures. So it's a question about, they should have been there for eternity. What are we doing to invade their space, right? The space of the dead. This is Tutankhamun's death mask. Again, one of the huge treasures that was found right on the mummy, right? And it's a shell to cover his mummy, again, to transform him into the godly state. For a while, it wasn't sure that if, because of the quickness of his death, I think he died very early, around age 19. Folks were thinking that perhaps this was actually a portrait of Nefertiti, his mother. But in the end, it was in fact, it is in fact thought to be Tutankhamun's death mask. But look at first of all, the gemstones and everything that is used in the mask is really the finest quality material that you have. But again, it wasn't for the human eye. It was meant for the god, and in fact, to transform him into a god. But we have, of course, taken it off the mummy. We have put it into a museum. And what does that do to turn something that was meant for a very different purpose and suddenly to become an object of awe, right? There's a question for me. What about for you? What do you think about this? We know all of Egyptian art has been taken from the tombs, from their most sacred spaces. It's almost like going into a church and robbing it. I mean, that's how, I mean, it was so tied, the death processions and the idea in relation to death was also spiritual. that now we have turned it into almost like a robbery. I mean, I can't describe it any other way. It goes into a museum, it's completely taken out of context. It's removed from where it was supposed to be for eternity. Is there another way we can do it? I think a lot of museums are questioning the artifacts that they have, and what culture they belong to, right? And how they have been used and manipulated through capitalism, really. I mean, they're worth, you know, if this is gold, this is precious stones, of course it's worth tremendous amount. I don't know. What do you think?
Because it has value. Well, we
Go
talk
ahead, Amy.
about art having value, and it's definitely some value to that. To the mass with the gold and the gems, we know that it could raise an eyebrow of, how much it would cost, and
right. There's right. We associate value to it.
I think the colonial master have really robbed not only the Egypt, but the entire Africa, because something like this happened in Nigeria too. If you go to British Art Museum up to today, you will still see some artwork of Nigerian from Benin, to be precise. Something like this, head caps, like that, is in British Art Museum. It was stolen from Nigeria. So it's like all these colonial masters, they value the artwork, and
but they valued it in a different way. They valued it for themselves. They didn't value it for gods. They didn't say, I'm going to give this up for the god. They said, I'm going to make money and profit off of it, right?
Yes, that is it. And they want to rewrite the history of those people that had those treachery as it is never exist. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
They want us to forget about it, that we don't have talent about it in Africa. Durable things are only meant for them. And that is the reason why, if you ask all these new generation children, they will never believe that they all came from Africa. All those hard work, they will never believe. And that is what the colonial master want to achieve, to show to their generations that, oh, these are the value of what we have done when you are not yet around, you know?
Right. I mean, it's such a, and I think you're right. I think it's a whole rewriting of history and wanting to share one perspective that is not what it was for. I think these artifacts that you see from all over Africa, because we're focusing on Egypt specifically, the skill and the craftsmanship and the way that this was done, this is solid gold, right? And to sculpt it into a particular face, it's tremendous amount of skill. And of course, all of Egypt had a tremendous amount of skill in terms of sculpture, in terms of painting, just these incredible artifacts. And again, it was obviously meant because of the culture was so rich in skill. It was able to supply artisans for thousands of years and value art, right? So that it would stay and remain. But it would stay and remain because they had a different philosophy in why they were making the art. They were not, with the colonial mindset, you're thinking about riches and gold for oneself. You're thinking about enriching and pillaging, really, other cultures to take as many resources as you can. Same way that they took the United States, right? You think about all the natural resources that are here and thinking, okay, we're going to, they're now ours, and we're going to take away all the natural richness of the country. So it is a really colonial mindset, and museums have a responsibility. Museums had started with that colonial mindset. They started with sending out archaeologists to get treasures for them. They sponsored it, right? The archaeologist that went into Tutankhamun's tomb was sponsored by a British, by someone wealthy who decided to contribute money so that that person can continue the job. But then to take all the riches from that culture and from that country and dump it into a museum now is it's a robbery. And we need to, and it is in some museums, and I think museums throughout Africa as well as throughout Europe are reconsidering what kind of collections they have and why they have them. Why is this in a British museum? Why is this in a museum in Germany? Why isn't it in a museum in Egypt? Why? So these questions about where it came from and what the natural intention was. When you think about the Menkaure, like from Monday, when you're thinking about the sculptures of the pharaoh with the queen next to him, that was from directly coming out of of the pyramid. And it's a very different, imagine walking up to a pyramid and seeing this lifelike sculpture of a couple who were the owners of the pyramid, right? It's a connection to the context that when we take these objects out and place them on a different place, obviously it takes them, the whole meaning is changed and shifted. And it's wrong. I can't think of any other, so I think museums are questioning, and they have to, because we're thinking about decolonization and thinking about rewriting history and writing it from a different point of view. But it's really to be self-critical and thinking about, now it's a shell. I mean, this death mask is a beautiful object. It's wonderful. It has a lot of monetary value, but in fact, it's not where it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be on the chest of Tutankhamun to transform him into a god for eternity. And when we stop that process, we deny him godship as he was intended to have. So there's a question of philosophy, and of course it also relates to how we think about death in a different way than obviously the Egyptians did. And there's a question with that. You know, because they thought that objects in Egyptian art actually were, in a sense, alive. They had a purpose, they had a function. Just because they were objects does not mean that they didn't. Just think about, there's the Enkisi figure, right? The sculpture with the nails in it. It served a purpose. We don't associate objects to have a purpose. We think that they're here for our use. And that's different. That's not okay, especially in terms of this work.
Professor.
Yeah, Georgina.
So I noticed that there is a cobra on top of that. Two, I think it's a two snake. I don't know if both of them are cobras or not. What does that mean?
That's a great question. I actually don't know the meaning of specifically. Maybe when we read the book and you'll see there's a little bit more detail of these objects. So I know that the whole thing would have been the crown, including the cobra. There's a cobra as well as a falcon. Do you know, Olusegun, what this meant?
Actually, if it's similar to what we have in Nigeria, it signifies that the king is powerful. You know, our cobra is dangerous and you cannot play with it. It shows that the king is powerful. Right. You can't play with the king. You must respect the king. It's a signal to show that it's a powerful person.
Okay. So that makes sense to me, because a lot of the gods would in fact have the styles or the pictures of animals, and we'll look at that now. There's a papyrus that I wanted to look at. It's from the last book of Judgment for about 1300 BCE, and it's of a scribe. And so, and you're probably right that the animals symbolize the power. That makes absolute sense to me. You have this is the Hunefer, who was a scribe, who was a writer of the hieroglyphs. And he's here asking if he was going to be taken into the afterlife. So if he had a virtuous life, then he would be considered to continue. So you have him over here at the top, asking all the gods of Egypt whether, you know, to reflect on his life. And you have half of them giving him the Ong signal, which is a symbol of, yes, he's allowed to go in the afterlife. He had a virtuous life. Then you have the specific gods over here. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly who they are, but when you read through the text, they will let you know. You have, this is a symbol for judgment over here. You have the scale. His heart would be over here in this, you know, during the mummification process, you would have the organs taken out and been put in those jars. And so his heart is over here on one side of the scale, and on the other side of the scale, you have a feather. And the feather is taken from the falcon over here, another symbol of God. And in fact, his heart is lighter than the feather, and he's allowed to continue on to the afterlife, and to go look at the I forgot who the main god was over here. I'm so sorry. I just lost the name. But he's wearing the white crown of Egypt. You have the everlasting symbol over here of the lotus flower. You have the canopic jars over here that are going to house his internal organs. And then again, you go into this after he's allowed to proceed. Here are some of the details of the hieroglyphs, and then you can see the canopic jar over here with his heart and the feather over here. And the gods would have had the human-like forms, but they would always have a animal-like head, and that would again symbolize, like you said, power, strength, right? Because animals have a whole other, and oftentimes they would be a depiction of either human form or a lion body with another creature's head. So it would be this conglomerate of various body parts. Okay, Hunnifer, Book of Judgment. Any questions on the papyrus? All right. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting conversation to think about how colonists have taken artifacts and art from globally from all over the world, and really pillaged and stolen these artifacts to go into a museum. Now we have a record of the artwork in museums to look at, which is great to study. And at the same time, are we doing a disservice to the cultures that we take these artifacts from, right? I think museums now are undergoing a change and a shift, understanding that some of the artifacts are not in their museums from the right places with the right intention, and have to reconsider their whole collections to see how they can support maybe the particular cultures, or perhaps return the artifacts back to their original places. It's a question, because now we understand that we have done pillage and wrong to these cultures, right? Any questions? I will have the quiz is going to be in my RCC tomorrow. You're welcome to take it anytime between now and next Monday. It's 3 simple questions based on today's slides. So if you need to review anything, review today's slides and read chapter 6, and you will be more than ready to take the quiz, okay? Next week, we're gonna go back into drawing and sculpting, and thinking about applying and what creates an object, especially, for example, like if you were to create an object for a dead relative, you know, if you were going to give your most prized possession to your grandmother or whoever, or great grandfather, or whoever passed away, imagine what that would look like. Usually we inherit objects from our relatives that pass away, right? Egyptian had that switched. They would give away their most prized possessions and artifacts to that person who has passed away, because they wanted to give it to them for the rest of eternity. That's what makes Egyptian art so spectacular. It's because it's a whole different way of understanding things. It's not about having things for our own lifetime, but giving those things away, you know, to the people who might need it more in a time where we, you know, that is uncertain, that we don't know about during the afterlife. That's what makes it interesting for me. Any questions?
So the quiz, are we something that we have to do it and upload, or just something that is time?
So it's going to be a Word document. There's going to be 3 questions in the Word document, and you're responding to those questions. So you're just typing it in. You can type it to me in an email. You can also type it into the document and just upload it back into the assignment. Okay. So it's basically 3 paragraphs about Egyptian art that you're reading about in your textbook for chapter 6.
You said chapter 6, okay.
Yeah, only focus on chapter 6. Chapter 5 is more of an introduction to Egyptian art. I would like to focus a little bit more on what we talked about today, especially in terms of rethinking about what the object is, right? We collect, and especially in capitalist culture, we collect and have tremendous amount of objects around us. And of course, most of them turn to trash. In fact, when many people die, a lot of the relatives go and they sell off all the objects, right? Because they think that those people don't need them anymore. It's a different way of looking. The Egyptian culture thought differently. And perhaps we should reevaluate how we think about things, that they're not just objects, that they have more value to them than just for our use.
More of a sentimental value than
Yeah. And again, if you were to give your grandparents or parents or, someone at the end of their life, a gift, and for them to take with them, what would that be? What would that look like? I mean, it's such an interesting gesture. It's not one we think about, especially in terms of in culture now with COVID, right? So many people are dying. We could reconsider what death is, I think. Right, just a different way of seeing things. All right, any questions? Any material that you would like to use? I know that I want to try to stick to the materials that we have at home, so pencil and paper are always good for next week. If you have colored pencils, those will be useful for next week. But I also want to show you a little bit of sculpture. I want to show you how they possibly could have gotten a form out of a block of clay or a block of stone, because it's so phenomenal. It takes so much work that I want us to get a little bit of practice. So in fact, I have a recipe for you to make some clay with. So next week, next Monday, I will give you that recipe, and it's simple, from cornstarch and baking soda, I think, and water. So it's 3 materials, relatively, hopefully simple to obtain. And you certainly don't have to run out and buy the materials. I can also show you and demonstrate, and you can do either a drawing or a sculpture. But if you would like to make some clay, I'll give you a recipe for that. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was super late today. I just want to ask, what is the assignment for this week?
So this week you're going to go back and listen to the PowerPoint that we just went over on Egypt, and your one assignment is a quick quiz. And now I shouldn't call it a quiz. It's really a writing assignment. It's answering 3 quizzes on Egyptian art. Okay, and it's basically what we have talked about today. And you can find the pages in your book in there's a link to book and prehistory that I want you to look at during this unit. The link is in my RCC, and you can
Is it the Art 232?
That's right. And you're focusing on, before you take the exam, you want to read pages 55 through 62.
All right. So read the introduction of chapter 5, and then the quiz, it's chapter 6.
Yes, for the quiz, should focus on chapter 6.
Okay.
There are articles within the reading, so
that's right. So so when you are looking at the text is actually, I think, very well done. You have the images, you have some articles that are linked to the particular artifacts that you're looking at, or you have a video. And the articles aren't particularly long. It's basically 1-page articles on each artifact. I like the ones with the video because they give you a description of where they are, where the artifacts have been taken. They do it from a perspective of being academics, and from art history. So they have that kind of, they really love the object and love the history behind it, but they're not ones to confront, the colonial aspects of the story. So there is a question when you're listening to the audio, the tone that they use and the sort of, you can have your own judgment about how they present the videos, but the information is correct in the videos. Okay. All right, folks, have a wonderful weekend. Read a little bit on Egyptian art. I will have, again, those 3 questions in my RCC for you by tomorrow. And you can have the time between now and Monday to answer the questions. I would like it due on Monday so that we can move on to the theory. And then from moving forward for the rest of the semester, we're going to do 1 week of reading from that book and 1 week working with our hands. Okay?
Okay.
All right, folks. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Okay?
All right,
well,
bye-bye.
and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.
You too, Kenny.
Professor.
Yes, Meilam.
So I I have my the imperfection work done, but the portal is closed. Do you mind reopen it so I can
I can reopen it, no worries. So I'll reopen it by the end of the day today, okay?
Okay.
So you
Thank
can
you
when
so
do you need do you have it